Hi guys, it's Dean from Into the Wild here, and today we're going to be looking at some of the animals we keep here in Into the Wild. So we're going to go through the animals, we're going to look at them, we're going to tell a little bit about them, where they come from and the different features and the diet of each animal, and hopefully I'll give you a little bit of something across this interactive session. Okay guys, so the first animal we've got is here. And this here guys, this is Tonks. And Tonks is what we call a North American, get out there honey, a North American striped skunk. Okay, now they call that because they got these big white stripes that go all the way down the middle of them. Now normally we see them traditionally black and white, which is more black with a small white stripe down their back, which we see in like the media such as cartoons and things like Pele. But skunks, striped skunks do come in lots and lots of different colours. So Tonks have just got a bit more white in her, which has merged more around her belly. So guys, we've had Tonks since she was 8 weeks old, and she's basically been hand reared. She used to live in the house with us, and actually lived in the house with us for about 6 months before she went outside to live with the rest of our skunks. We keep 4 together, and they all live quite harmoniously together. So Tonks lived in the house, and that's because she was hand reared because her mother unfortunately died when she was 3 weeks old. And as a result, a friend of ours had to then hand rear her, and another 9 of her litter mates. And he did so successfully, and the end result was that they had 10 happy little hand-reared skunks. Were absolutely wonderful. So Tonks used to live in the house with us, and actually he's better behaved than most of my dogs. She used to cuddle up and watch TV with me before she matured and went outside to live with the rest of our gang. So guys, I'm not sure how much you actually know about skunks, but skunks come from mainly North America. They go as far north as Canada, as far south as Mexico. So they range quite a far distance across all of North America, and they actually live in mainly wooded areas, but they do often go into city areas now and again because of the encroaching buildings and things. Yeah, so they're mainly found in forest areas, but they do actually encroach into cities and housing estates and things now and again. So skunks are really cool. They've got lots of amazing features and adaptations, and more or less all of us know something about a skunk. So mainly the things we associate with skunk are their colour and they smell. So we'll start with the colour first. Like I said, normally traditionally we see them as black and white, but they do come in a wide range of colours. And their range of colours have more or less naturally occurred in the wild. You might not see them as much in different colours, but they do all naturally occur in the wild. And that's kind of because they don't actually need their colour to blend into their environment. So by being this nice bright colour, and you think she's against this background here, and where she'd live is kind of like foresty colours like we've got all around us, all these greens and browns. So you think with this big white stripe in the middle, she'd actually stand out. And normally, that's not good for animals to have a big standout colour. But for the skunk, it is a good thing. So when we see bright colours in amongst all of this, we think danger. And the animals will think danger as well. So the skunk's good defence they do have is their colour. So they don't actually need to blend into their environment. They actually use their colour to stand up and say, leave me alone, back off, I'm a skunk. And if you come near me, you're going to be in trouble. So what they do first is, by having that bright colour, normally animals think, whoa, no, I'm not going to bother. But if that fails, animals still get a little bit intrigued by them. They do want to try and face them to try and eat them, because they are a small animal, don't forget. Then skunks do give warnings before they finally let out that really horrible spray that we all know a skunk to have. So firstly, if she felt a little bit scared, she'd start stamping the floor and dragging her feet along the floor. That's warning you. And that is basically saying, back off, leave me alone. This is your first warning. If she then felt a little bit threatened, or more threatened even, and the animal didn't get the message, she can actually start doing a little handstand. So basically jumping from the back to the front and sticking her tail up at the right angle. And that is then showing you where the spray is going to come from. And then saying, guys, seriously, one more time, we're getting sprayed. So guys, then if she did feel really threatened and the animal still didn't get the message, she could turn around and spray that really horrible stinky spray at you. Okay? Now, it's not just a smelly spray, and it's not a gas. So she's got musk and scent glands in her bottom. She's got 2, one on either side, and they hold about 15 millilitres of spray. So quite a small amount of spray, but it's also very, very effective amount of spray. Now what she would do is spray that animal, And she can spray with accuracy about 15 foot, so a couple of meters. So if an animal got about 15 foot near her, then she can actually spray that spray. And the aim is, firstly, to get in the animal's eyes. And by doing that, it stings. Because it's an oil, it'll stick to their eyes and it really, really stings. So that's a bit of a warning and saying, yeah, you've had your warning, go. And the animal normally takes a message from that. The other part of this spray then is that smell. That smell smells something like a mixture of all the things we don't like, so burning rubber, garlic, sulphur, so like rotten eggs, all mixed in one, and it really does smell. It's very, very pungent. You can smell it from quite a way away. So what in essence they do is, if they did spray an animal because an animal was stupid enough or desperate enough to get near them, that spray would then stick to that animal's fur. Because it's an oil and not a gas, it actually, or not an aerosol, it actually stick to their fur, and it's very, very hard to get rid of. And everything that animal touches would also smell like a skunk. So basically, if she decided to spray me today, I'd smell like a skunk, my clothes smell like a skunk, and everything surrounding me would smell like a skunk, and then everything I touched would also smell like a skunk. Not a skunk, but a skunk spray, which is not pleasant. Normally skunks smell quite musky, kind of like a ferret, which is not overall unpleasant, but that spray is something quite phenomenal, quite pungent. So then, if she did spray the animal would go away smelling like a skunk, and basically they'd have trouble hunting other animals, because animals can smell with them. Because don't forget, it's a very pungent odour, and it's not hard to not detect, basically. So the animal might very well starve to death, because animals they hunt can smell and come in. So normally the only things that do tend to catch skunks in the wild would be birds of prey. Things they can't actually see coming, they can swoop down and grab them. Because things like pumas, mountain lions would have had that defence used against them. So, very good. So at the front of Tonks' feet, I don't know if you can see her, but you probably can't, she's got very, very, very long claws. Now those claws are used for foraging for her favourite foods. So not just foraging for favourite foods, but digging holes in the floor, basically. They're long, blunt claws, and they can use them for digging holes in the floor to look for their favourite foods, things like beetles, bugs, earthworms, anything really that can live underground. Yeah, so they can use them claws, or those claws, for actually digging quite ferociously or quite quickly into the ground to actually find their prey. It's not just bugs they eat though, they're actually called omnivores, skunks are. So skunks will eat a wide range of things, more or less like we do. So bugs, other animals, small animals, things like rats, mice, other sorts of rodents, and birds, and they also eat lots of fruit and vegetables as well. Favourites being things like apples and blackberries, they normally find in the wild. So the sensors they use to find them, you can probably see there, she's sniffing like crazy. We've sprinkled a couple of bugs in amongst this camouflage cloth here, and she's actually using that nose to find the very food. She's got an incredible sense of smell, which she's using then to forage all through this to find all the bugs that are scattered down here. Very, very good, powerful sense of smell. And that's good to have, because their eyesight isn't very good. They've only got very small eyes, and the eyesight is kind of like blurry, so she can't really see long distances. You can see close up, kind of like a shape, but she can't see incredibly well. Not like we can, or not like other animals can. So she uses that sense of smell to find the food. Which doesn't matter too much to her, because they're an animal which is called a crepuscular animal, which means they're not strictly nocturnal, and they're not strictly diurnal, which means they don't come out at day, they don't come out at night. They actually come out in between, so at the dusk and dawn hours, so just when it's getting light and just when it's getting dark. So that's when they normally come out and forage for their food. So their eyesight doesn't need to be great, but their nose definitely does. The other thing to note about skunks is that at the moment, because it's summer, she's actually a lot slimmer than she normally becomes winter time. So what they do in the summer, because the summer months can be quite hot, like it is outside today or like it has been this week, she will actually, come to summertime, start shedding her fur and start dropping a little bit of weight. And that's because food is more readily available in the summer, and also because if it gets very, very hot, she doesn't want to overheat. Now, come winter time, normally autumn, they start bulking up and start eating a lot more food, and then they will actually grow their coat out nice and thick and fluffy, and that's to help them to cope with some extreme temperatures during the winter. So when it gets really cold or really snowy in the environment they live in, they can actually cope with that, because they've increased their fat stores and their food stores, and they've also grown this nice, thick, fluffy fur. So she will more or less double in the size, not because she eats a lot more, not because she gets fatter, she will get a little bit fatter, but also that fur gets nice and thick and fluffy as well. So guys, I think that's more or less all we've got to say on tongs. We're going to move along to our next animal. Next animal I'm going to show you is Pele. Now Pele is something we call a Brazilian three-banded armadillo. Firstly, the name, we call him Pele because he's Brazilian. He looks a bit like an old school football because he does roll up into this ball. So we thought it was quite a clever name for him. So this is Pele and he's a three-banded armadillo. Now, there's a few different species of armadillo, about 20 different species of armadillo. And he is one of the smaller species. He's not the smallest being reserved for the pink fairy armadillo, but he's nowhere near the biggest species of armadillo. So, three-banded armadillo, namely because if you look at his back, he's got these 1, 2, 3 bands. So I'm not sure if you can see my fingers out. I'll try and get as close as possible. There, there, and there. He's got 3 of them, so they're called three-banded armadillos. Bits in between are just flexible connective tissue to actually connect the bands together. So yeah, that's Pele. He's a three-banded armadillo. So, like I said, endemic to Brazil because they are called a Brazilian three-banded armadillo. But there's also something called a southern three-banded armadillo, which does go a little bit south in South America. So he's a really, really cool animal. And that's mainly because, well, I think he's really cool because he can actually roll up into a complete ball. And the Brazilian and the southern three-banded armadillos being the only armadillo species that can actually do that. So when he's defending himself, he will actually roll up into this ball, and his head and his tail, so if you look at him, his head and his tail, so head there, tail there, they're exactly the same shape, more or less the same size. So what he will do if he's defending himself, because he's got a very, very soft belly, he will roll up into this ball and his head and his tail will fit together, kind of like a transformer. Yeah? So he'll snap shut and nothing will be able to get to his very soft belly because his outer skin is incredibly tough. Now, this skin is actually made out of more or less the same things that fingernails are made out of. It's called keratin. That's just basically the base layer. The top layer is keratin, with the underneath being bits of bony prominence with this keratin layer on top. So it feels a bit like a callus or a fingernail. But it is incredibly hard and incredibly tough to get through to him. So if he wanted to defend himself, he would just roll up into this ball and then let an animal try and scratch and chew away at him because it is very tough to get through it. And the hope is that they'd actually give up. But the other defense he's got, which he uses before he uses just hiding away, is basically he will leave his shell open like this. So not completely shut. So he looks a bit like Pac-Man at the moment, yeah. So not completely shut. By doing that, he allows himself to see, smell and hear things or animals that are coming to him. Now, if an animal did come up to him close enough to kind of stick their paw in or stick their nose in, he can actually snap shut on them. And he can either catch their paw or their nose in his shell, which does actually really, really hurt and can actually break their paw. He would at the very least startle them. So like snapping shut, he actually startles an animal and it's actually quite scary. But if he does catch them in there, he can actually break their paw because he's got a lot of strong abdominal muscles which help him close up into that ball. And the side walls of his shell are very, very fine and very thin. So if he catches you, it's like a crab's pincer or a scorpion's claw grabbing you. Isn't it, Pele? So, should we get up off here? I'm trying to untangle him here. Good. So, he's got really cool adaptations apart from that really tough shell. He's got this extremely powerful sense of smell. So if you can see him, if I put him a little bit close to the camera, you can probably see he's twitching his nose. And by twitching his nose, he's actually sniffing for all the food you like to eat. So if you can guess what food you like to eat, or have a think about what food you like to eat, he has only got teeth right at the back of his mouth, so they need to be really small. And he's got this big, long, sticky tongue. So the things he likes to eat are things like ants and termites. But it's not limited to ants and termites. You can eat soft fruits and carrion, so rotten flesh. You can eat as well. But his favourites are ants and termites. Obviously in captivity, we haven't got a endless supply of ants and termites, so we bring in a special dietary powder which we mix into like a porridge style consistency for him, and he just laps it up with that big long sticky tongue, kind of like lassoing up into his mouth. And that's basically all the nutrients that he needs that he'd normally eat in the wild with the ants and termites. Now, these guys are actually vulnerable in the wild, and that's mainly because of things like habitat loss And people in South America, or the indigenous people of South America, do actually catch and eat these guys as well. It doesn't look too appetizingly, but it can be done. So they are actually vulnerable in the wild. Now, those big claws that he's got on the front of his feet, he actually walks on his tiptoes, he walks on his fingernails. Now, they are big, thick, heavy claws, and they actually carry most of his body weight, or all of his body weight. He can actually tripod a little bit with the back, but they do carry the front half of his body. Now, they need to be very strong, firstly, like I said, because they carry his body, and secondly, because these claws can actually dig holes into really hard structures, so things like termite mounds, and then to a lesser extent ant hills, you use to basically pull apart and destroy using these claws, and then with that big sticky tongue, as I mentioned, he would actually lap them up like he's basically lassoing them off the ground. Now, despite looking like a stone, and being a stone is actually a good defense for him, he can actually swim. So armadillos, three-banded armadillos, can actually swim quite well across like lakes and not lakes, streams. So they can swim across streams, and they can actually hold their breath for about 6 minutes underwater. So you wouldn't really think, looking at them, that he's a very good swimmer, but they are in fact quite good, quite powerful swimmers. Just going to let him have a little wander there for you. You can see he's very, very odd when he moves. He kind of walks in this little hunch, but they can flatten out just a little bit more when they are lying flat on their bed. Isn't it, buddy? But what they would do, the way they actually hide away and defend themselves in the wild, is by using that camouflage of looking like a stone or looking like a rock. Instead of digging holes under the ground to hide away, they would actually just go rest up in a bush or some shrubland and curl up into that ball, or kind of mostly the way into a ball. And by looking like a stone, you think animals wouldn't actually want to go eat them, because nobody really wants to taste a stone. You know? So guys, I think that is about it for me and Pele. We are going to introduce the next animal now. So it's a goodbye from me and Pele for now. The last animal we're about to see is this little guy. His name is Monty, and he's a royal or a ball python. So they're called two different names, and I'll explain why. You can probably see why to start. This is why you call a ball python, because a lot of the time when they're a little bit nervous, or they're just waking up, or they sleep in, they wrap themselves nice and tightly in a ball. So all their body would basically encompass their head, and their head is right in the middle. Just helps them to feel nice and safe and secure. So when he's feeling more relaxed, then he will actually come out with his ball and start exploring just a little bit. The other name for them, being a royal python, that comes from ancient Egypt, where queens like Cleopatra would actually use them as bracelets or bangles, so jewellery. So royalty would actually use these guys as jewellery, which is where the name the royal python comes from. So you can see now he's getting a little bit happy, and he's actually starting to come out of his ball just a little bit. Okay? So royal pythons are actually the smallest python species in Africa, and they measure about 6 foot in length, so just a little bit shorter than him. And the males, which Monty is, are just a little bit smaller than the females. So they can live up to 45 years old, generally averaging about 30 years. So they're quite a long-lived species of snake, and people actually start keeping these as pets nowadays because they're such a nice, friendly snake. But it's important that if you are keeping them as a pet, then you know their lifespan is quite long, and you are going to have to look after them for quite a prolonged period of time. So, like I said, they come from Africa, but they come from Western and Central Africa, where they mainly prefer to live in sort of grassy areas, so like sparse wooded areas, anywhere that really this nice pattern that he's got, a nice colour, can actually blend into the environment. Now, they blend in for two different reasons. The first one is obviously to hide away, so hiding from predators. So this is camouflage, this is our traditional camouflage colour. And if you think that the areas he likes to live in are kind of like greens and browns, like this is everything all around us, and I put him down and he's hiding from any sort of predator in that environment, then he would actually hide away and blend in quite well. So it helps him to hide away from things that like to eat them, like big animals, big mammals, big birds of prey, bigger snakes. They can all predate on these guys. So they use that colour and that pattern to actually hide away and blend into the environment. The other reason in that colour is to actually hunt. So by being this colour, it actually, again, helps them to blend in, but not for hiding this time, it's actually for hunting. So they can actually hunt and slither up and sneak on their food using this colour to blend in. The food generally doesn't tend to see them come in. So it helps them to hunt quite well and camouflage when they would rather not be seen. So if we look at him, he's got lots of distinctive features, as snakes have, and all adaptations actually help him to basically live in the environment he lives in, eat the food he likes to eat, and basically live a long, healthy life. So if we look at him, he is flicking his tongue. I don't know if you can see him there, but snakes will flick their tongue. By flicking their tongue, what they're doing is picking up particles, basically smell particles, scent particles, so it helps him to find his way to sources of food using that tongue. And basically the tongue is split in two, so it's called a fork tongue, and he gets particles from either side, the left and the right, and depending which side smells the best or tastes the best, he would actually follow that route to find his prey, so find his food. When he's in the general vicinity of that then, to help him lock onto the food items, he could sit and wait, and the way he'd hunt his food is using those what we call heat sensing pits, which are just under his nostrils. So he's got holes that go along the top of his mouth, little pits, about 3 or 4 on either side, and by having those, he actually can see nice warm animal food items where otherwise you wouldn't be able to see them. So in the dark, for example, so they can actually hunt the dark quite effectively because they don't rely on their eyesight. They use that really good heat sensing mechanism in the pits they've got just over their mouth, which is really cool. So once they've found their food, these snakes are constrictors, so they haven't got any venom in them at all. They are what we call constrictors. What we mean by that is that when they've hunted their food, hunted their prey, they would basically bite them and wrap their whole body around that prey item. Now, the way they then kill that item, the prey item, so things like a mouse or a rat or a small bird, is via what we call constriction. And what we mean by that is that every time the animal breathes in, the snake will get tighter and tighter and tighter and squeeze tighter around their body, so that they eventually can't take any more breaths and do eventually die. When they've done that then, they would swallow the animal in one go. Their mouths aren't constructed the same as ours, their teeth are not the same as ours, so they can't actually chew their food. So what they do, they swallow the animal in one go. And the way they do that, because the animals they like to eat are actually bigger than their mouth, generally the way we look at food is their belly plus a little bit, which is a lot bigger than their mouth. Their faces, or their jaws, are constructed completely differently to ours. So our jaw, this is our mandible, is one bone that goes from this side all across to that side in one big bone. The snakes are basically on one side, two side, and then a joint in the middle with a ligament, so a stretchy ligament, which actually helps them to stretch their jaw really, really wide. And then they've also got this really stretchy skin. It goes all on their neck and all down their body, which basically expands or opens up for the animal to then be dragged into the mouth slowly, and then slowly goes down into their stomach. And that's how they eat their food. Now, once they've had a big meal, or generally every 5 to 7 weeks, they will actually shed their skin. So this skin they've got on now, which is going quite dark, would actually shed off them. So when they grow, their skin can get quite tight. Basically, like when we go out for a big meal and we eat quite a lot of food, our clothes can get quite tight on us because we've obviously expanded a little bit. Speaking for myself, I'm not sure about you guys. And basically, the way that they deal with that is by shedding their skin. So they can't take their clothes off, but they can shed their skin and have this nice fresh skin underneath as they grow. So the way they indicate they're going to shed is that the layers in between the skin will actually separate, and there'll be a milky fluid underneath there. So we normally tend to see their eyes go in like a milky white or blue colour when they come up to shed. And then a couple of days later, their skin will come off in one go, peeling from the tip of their nose down to the tip of their tail in one go, basically pulling off like a sock. And that's how we kind of know that a snake is healthy, because they shed this nice
clean shed with no bits left on them. So yeah, that guys is Monty the Python. Again, I'm sorry about the name.